think this is a very touchy subject. So if you watch the Japanese game, there's a lot of people talking about how the goalkeeper is black. So right here, Zion Suzuki, he is a half black, half Ghanaian, and half Japanese soccer player. He's the goalkeeper for the national Japanese soccer team. Now, I do believe he was born in Newark, New Jersey. And yeah, I mean, great goalkeeper. Like, everyone was raving about how good he is as a goalkeeper. But I do want to touch on this issue of ethnicity and national identity. Now, there's a liberal right here who says this guy, Alonzo Germanandi. Japan's goalkeeper, Zion Suzuki, must be destroying the minds of a lot of racists. Turns out the U.S.-born son of a Ghanaian and a Japanese who grows up in Japan is, after all, Japanese. Now, what do we all mean by this? I think it's really important to clarify all of our terms when we're talking about ethnicity and nationality, our personal identity. Because here's one thing I'll say about, well, because we have to define our terms or else we don't know what we're talking about. But I think Zion Suzuki actually is a good example of an immigrant who assimilates and adopts the culture. And so right here, we all know that he's half Japanese. So his mother is Japanese, but his father is Ghanaian. And his family relocated to Japan when he was very little, but he used what? His mother's surname. Now, as conservatives, we all believe that children should take their father's surname. I think that's appropriate, but they chose to use his mother's surname, not his father's surname, because of integration, for integration purposes. Since they were moving permanently to Japan, it only made sense to use that surname. That's actually a good thing. That is actually a good thing. If you're an immigrant who moves and wants to settle down, and you need to adopt the customs, the language, the culture, everything about that country, about your host country. If you say to do that in America, they call you racist. But that's what's needed. That's the bare minimum. In Japan, family registration and daily life strongly favor Japanese surnames for smoother integration, schooling, legal matters, and obtaining affirming Japanese citizenship. If they remained in the U.S. or moved to Ghana, he would have used his father's surname, I assume. He went through Urawa Red Diamonds Academy, blah, blah, blah. He's one goalkeeper. Many clubs are monitoring. He was linked to Manchester United at some point, and I hope he gets a big move shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, Zion Suzuki. So that's his background. And that is objectively a good thing. Like, as a foreigner, you should not go to a different country and then demand that everyone acquiesce to you. Everyone cater to your needs. And that's what increasingly foreigners are doing in Japan. You see, that's why a lot of Muslims and Indians are becoming viewed very unfavorably in Japan because they have their festivals and they're being really rowdy and obnoxious in public. They do their prayer calls and they do the little, like, you know, the thing that the Muslims do. What do they do? Like they do the little Muslim chant in public and are disruptive. Where in Japan is a very polite society. So they don't like that. And they don't change their names. They just keep it complicated, and then they call you hateful if you can't pronounce their name correctly. Yeah, it's just so obnoxious. People hate that kind of behavior. That's why anti-immigration sentiment is rising. But Zion Suzuki is actually a good example of good integration, proper assimilation, where, yeah, he is half Japanese, but he's not full Japanese. And by all intents, he looks more black than he does Japanese. But they made the conscious decision to use his mother's surname so that he can integrate better into Japanese society. I think that's a good thing. Now, I want to touch on what is national identity and ethnicity. And this is something that we all need to understand. Now, I want to pull up this picture right here. The people who say that you can't be black Japanese are going to be mad. Japan's goalkeeper is black. Okay. First of all, yes, these are all straw man arguments, right? Like they always do that with the game Assassin's Creed Shadows, where they're like, oh yeah, look at the black samurai. And everyone was mad about it because, you know, Japanese aren't black. We all know this. But this person is saying, oh yeah, look at the black Japanese. Black people can be Japanese. And they never do this other way around, by the way. If a white person's like, I'm Nigerian and lives in Nigeria, they call him a colonizer and to get out. No, you're not Nigerian. If I say as a Korean, you know, I'm going to go to, let's say I go to India. I'm like, I'm Indian. They're not going to be like, no, you're not Indian. You're Korean. You're different. There's clearly something different about you. And everyone knows this. So if you look at this picture of the national soccer team of Japan. don't be obtuse. Don't intentionally be obtuse. You look at this picture, you understand what is different. Everyone knows, aside from the goalkeeper jersey being different, there's one person who is different, who looks unlike all the other players. And it is Zion Suzuki. He's different. Everyone knows he's different. People try to gaslight you that not to notice that he's different, but he is different. He is different. To deny this reality is to deny reality itself, but it is also to completely subvert preserving your own national heritage and identity. Now, this is something that people need to understand. Nations are not just political entities. They're not just plots of lands with borders. Nations are historical ancestral communities. Nations are a body of people who share ancestry and culture. That's what heritage is. That's what nationhood was traditionally always understood as. But nations are historical communities descended from common ancestors. That's what it is. That is the definition. And this is important to preserve this. Why? Because we all know that shared ancestry results in higher social cohesion, long-term trust, sense of extended kinship. This is why when a Korean sees another Korean in America, they have an intrinsic bond that's already formed because, hey, you're one of me. You come from where I come from. This is a part of who we are. And this also results in higher trust societies. Why? Because you can trust each other. You have a certain degree of understanding. Hey, I know where you come from. You're one of my people. And so that is something to understand, because all these studies done show that multiculturalism and increased diversity actually results in lower community activity, lower community giving, lower charitable giving, low trust. That's what it results in. Because if you don't know your neighbors, if you don't come from the same heritage and the same background, yes, there's going to be something that is different about each other. You don't have anything shared. And people say diversity is a strength. No, it's not. Unity is a strength. But we cannot unify over differences. That makes no sense. How are you supposed to unify over differences? You're different, I'm different, so we're going to unify over that? You like ramen, I like burgers. Let's unify over that. How does that make any sense? No. Communities form over shared interests. You see this online, right? You have the gaming community, and then you have niche gaming communities. You have the Zelda community, you have the Mario community, you have the Nintendo community, you have the Sonic community. You form communities over shared interests. That's why you have the Korean American community and then the Black American community. And you have all these different communities because you form communities over shared interests. Why do you have basketball community online? You have the right wing because there are shared interests that we share that forms community, and that's how we are. That's a strength. Insofar as we try to advocate for certain things, certain causes, but diversity is not a strength. It's actually something that is destabilizing and very harmful. Origin immigrant? Yeah, I am, but I understand this. I understand this. It does destabilize a community, and it doesn't allow for the proliferation and handing down of heritage. And so when ancestry becomes irrelevant, national identity can gradually transform into a purely administrative category. Truly. So we have to understand, yes, people say that there's a difference between ethnicity and nationality, but that is a modern concept. Everything that people understand today, they don't understand things throughout history. They don't know history. They don't even know how the English language and vernacular lexicon came to be. Nationality and ethnicity were the same thing. They actually come from the same root word. It's just ethnicity comes from Greek and nationality comes from Latin. Nations, ethnicity, that all meant the same thing. Ethnicity was not used in the English lexicon until the 60s, into the mid-1900s. That's when it started to be commonly used because of mass migration and immigration, and as people move towards a globalist society. But there was never a distinction between nationality and ethnicity because a nationality always was tied to your ethnicity. And herein lies now the confusion. Now there's confusion, and this is something that we shouldn't desire as people. Oh, what does it mean to be Japanese? Who is a Japanese? Is a Japanese someone who just holds Japanese citizenship? No one actually thinks that. If PewDiePie went anywhere in the world, would people say that he's Japanese? No. He's not descended from the Japanese. He lives in Japan. Okay, is he as Japanese as the person who's descended from Japan for thousands of years? No, no one actually believes this. When I go anywhere in the world, they're not saying American. No, they say Coreano. They say Korean. I've been to so many foreign countries. The number one thing I always get, Korean. Everyone knows this. Everyone knows that intrinsically that there is something special and there's something important as part of our identity in where we come from, in our ancestry and in our heritage. But what's happening right now is, in the same way that we see with radical individualism, we see with transgenderism, it is a reintroduction of Gnostic thought into society. Why? Because Gnosticism teaches that the material world and anything material is something to be overcome. It is actually not important or bad, and actually your spiritual self, your self-identification is actually the only thing that matters, right? Your inner spiritual reality is the only thing that matters. And actually the goal of the person is a detachment of your inner spiritual reality from your physical embodiment. Your body is something to overcome. But the problem is, not only Christianity, but proper, just regular human anthropology, we all know this, that we are a unity between body and soul. We are dualistic beings. That our body is a part of our soul, and that is intrinsically intertwined. That's why God has different commandments for men and women, for example. Because as you might just chalk up male and female to your biology, but also no, that is part of who you are spiritually. That is part of who you are in your soul. We are very, very much dualistic. Your body is not accidental, and your ancestry, sex, family, peoplehood are real aspects of who God created you to be. People keep saying this. They say this online. There's a lot of memes about, oh man, like the chances of you being born blank is this blank percent. No, it's not. You being born as who you are is 100%. Because you're not an accident. Your ancestry, your genetics are not an accident. Right? So a Gnostic impulse, especially when it comes to this topic, it says what you physically are is irrelevant. What matters is what you choose, feel, or identify as. And this is what a lot of people who say America's a propositional nation say, right? That it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter who you are physically. Your ancestry doesn't matter. It just matters about what you believe. That's the only thing that matters. No, but that's not true. We all know that's not true. Why do you think people, even those people who say that America is only a propositional nation, why do you think they look at me and they're like Korean? They're like, yeah, man, I like kimchi. They're trying to relate to me because I'm Korean. Because they know I'm Korean. It's a part of who I am. And so modern Western culture increasingly treats identity as something internally constructed rather than received. But we know that, again, nations are not arbitrary social constructs, but they're extended historic families. That's what a nation is. Shared ancestry, a people group. That's what a nation always is. When the Bible talks about every nation, every tribe, every tongue will come and confess that Christ is Lord, they will come together and, submit to Christ in the end of days, and they will see him. They will see him exalted. Yeah, that's literally, nations are people groups. Because why? That's what it meant historically throughout all of history. Everyone understood this. But when it comes to our identity is not self-constructed. I'm sorry to say that. People need to understand this. Your identity is not self-constructed. It's not internally constructed. It is received. If you as a Christian believe in God, you believe that your identity as a son or daughter of God is not something because of what you did. It's not a product of what you've done. It is merely by the grace of God. It is something you receive because God has created you to be a son or daughter of God. Many people in the past used to always say this when they introduce themselves. They don't say this anymore, which is, again, this is a product of our Gnostic modernity. Whenever they introduce themselves, they would say, hey, my name is this, son of this. I am this, daughter of this person. In Korean, they always say that too. And every single civilized society, they always said this. They always introduce themselves as a part of their clan and who their parents are. Why? Why? Because that is a core part of who you are. That is a core part of your identity. Your identity is formed by your relationships, your natural bonds, where you come from. That is a big part of who you are. And yes, you might have different beliefs, different customs, sure. But your identity is, first and foremost, it is received. It is not internally constructed. And that is the great lie of transgenderism. That is the great lie of radical individualism that says that we're all just isolated units and you can just become and be whoever you want to be. No, that's not true. I will never be a black person. I will never be a black person because I'm Korean. I'll never be a white person because I'm Korean. And that's okay. That's not a bad thing. But the more that you try to gaslight everyone to thinking that it's not true, the more that people will become rootless cosmopolitans that have no roots, that have no ties to their land and their culture and their history and their ancestry and their family. And as a result, what happens? Rootless people are easy to control. If people don't have a foundation, they're easy to control. And so I think I want to talk about this in terms of, modern society increasingly teaches that objective realities such as sex, ancestry, peoplehood, family are meaningless and can be replaced entirely by subjective self-identification. Yeah, this is just not true. This is just not true. And then what applies to this context with Zion Suzuki in Japan, we need to ask ourselves, is Japan fundamentally an ancestral nation that welcomes outsiders to assimilate, or Japan merely a legal territory whose population can be endlessly redefined? And we all believe the former, where Zion Suzuki, he should not be treated with harm. He should not be hurt because of his mixed ancestry. But the reality is he is half Japanese. He is not fully Japanese. He is not as Japanese as someone who descended from Japan for many, many years. But the means by which immigrants have always assimilated into a culture, into a country, has always been through marriage. And so if Zion Suzuki marries a Japanese woman, their children will probably look actually more Japanese than they do black. And then their children marry Japanese. Yeah, by that generation, probably be indistinguishable from other Japanese people. I'm not like a racial purist. But just because I'm not a racial purist, just because racial purity is not a thing that I agree with, doesn't mean that I discount the reality of ancestry and ethnicity. This is how we know. If you take a 20andMe quiz or you do a test, an ancestry test, you know where you come from. That's why they have categories. You have certain percentage Mediterranean, this certain percentage Nigerian or this people group, because everyone knows that these are real. They're not socially constructed, but these are realities. These are real parts of our identity. And to say and to gaslight people that, oh yeah, nationality, ethnicity they're completely separate concepts and should be untethered from one another. It is literally peak clownery. It is not how we think. This is not actually what we believe. And it's not what actually people understand and how they see the world. It is literally it's just gaslighting. It's just literally gaslighting at this point. And so there's nothing wrong with wanting to preserve your country for your people, because why? A nation is first and foremost is people. And a nation is an extension of a family. It is historical communities that come from shared ancestries. That's what a nation is. That's how people have always oriented themselves and organized themselves throughout society, throughout human history, all the time. And as a Christian, you can say that, yes, there's human equality before God, that mixed race individuals are not lesser than, and that they are still beings with dignity and image bearers of God. But you can also acknowledge the legitimacy of peoples and nations, heritage, and that's a real thing, and the importance of ancestry and inherited identity. That our identity, again, it's not self-constructed internally. It is received. We are defined by our interactions, our relationships, and where we come from. That's what defines us. And then, yes, like what we believe about all of those things and how we understand those relationships. That's what defines us. But your identity is not self-constructed, and that is the biggest lie. So when it comes to Zion Suzuki, no, objectively, he is not as Japanese as another Japanese person. No one believes that because everyone can see just by the picture, he is different. He is different. He is different than other people. But just because he's different doesn't mean that we treat him cruelly. But at the same time, it doesn't mean you ignore that reality. Because what happens as a result, it opens the door to the destruction and displacement of your peoples and your country. So yes, I do think that we need to move towards the tie between ethnicity and nationality once again, because the traditional understanding and the understanding throughout all of human history for nations has always been a shared home, a home for a shared people with shared ancestry and culture. And people need to understand this, or else people will become, again, rootless cosmopolitans, untethered from their roots, and easy to control from godless globalist elites who want to control you. And that is why the Christian patriot, not only just the Christian, but the Christian patriot who loves their country and holds on to where they come from, are the strongest bulwark against tyranny and against godless powers. Because if you know where you come from and who you are, then you can move confidently into the future in what you have to do in boldness and conviction. So yes, ethnicity matters, race, in fact, does matter. Why? Because ethnicity, ancestry matters. Ancestry matters. Where you come from matters. And that is all inherited. So who we are physiologically matters. We're not Gnostics as Christians. We believe that we are embodied souls, that our bodies and soul are intertwined. That you cannot escape your body. It is a part of who you are. Don't escape it. Don't ignore it. Actually, we need to talk more about it, in my opinion, but in a healthy way and in a productive way. That being said, the last thing I'll say about this issue, because we've been going long. Sorry, I just yap too much. I feel so bad for producer E over there. I think he's like holding in, he has to go to the bathroom, but I'm gonna wrap this up. This one thought, we do have half black, half Japanese people. We have Rui Hachimura. He plays for the NBA, I believe, does he? Yeah, he plays Lakers, right? Yeah, he plays for the Lakers. He's a good basketball player. We also have a middle on the Japanese volleyball team. His name is Larry Ibade Dan. And then this is what he looks like. Right here. I guess you can't see it. I don't know if you can see it. But yeah, so basically, yeah. And it's for all of these players, you all intrinsically know that they're different. Why? Because they're black. They are. They're part black, so they are different than other Japanese people. To look at a picture with these half black athletes and to say that, oh, they are not different than the average Japanese, yeah, it's just foolishness. You don't have to lie. You don't have to lie. But at the same time, if they are assimilating, if they're becoming a productive member of society, I don't think it is bad because, again, every single nation had its cohort of immigrants and had its sex community of foreigners. But one thing I do want to advise against, the global homo agenda of diversity, equity, inclusion, to say that you are a hateful person if you want to preserve tradition and your ancestry. I want to warn against that. Because once you start to normalize this throughout society, because it should be an exception in your society. It should not be the norm. But once you start to elevate them into becoming representatives on behalf of your country, that's when you start to lose your national identity. Where if you start to normalize, hey, look at all these black Japanese people who are just as Japanese as Japanese as other Japanese and ancestral Japanese, then you start to normalize your country becoming lost and subverted and endlessly redefined into something that it's not. That's the warning, where I don't have anything inherently against Zion Suzuki playing as a goalkeeper for Japan. But once you start to elevate non-Japanese people, non-ancestral Japanese people, and this goes for Korea, this goes for any European country. You look at the French team, right? The entire French team they're black. They're sub-Saharan African, and they have like African names. But you start to do that as representatives of your country on your world stage, what happens inherently is a normalization of the displacement of your people. And you will no longer have a people. And I'm sorry. Actually, I'm not sorry. For example, I don't want white people on the Korean national soccer team. Call me hateful, but I don't want white people representing Korea at the World Cup. I'm not hateful for that. It's just I think Koreans should represent Korea. And you can say, yes, Zion Suzuki grew up in Japan, adopted his mother's surname. He's half Japanese. Yes, I agree with, yes, that's all true. But then to normalize okay, non-ethnic Japanese becoming the face of Japan, it normalizes it. And it results in the displacement and the loss of your country. Why? Because a nation is, like I said, a home for shared people with people with shared ancestry and customs. I'll say that over and over again because a nation is first and foremost its people. That's what I'll say about it. There's a lot of people online who are saying, what the heck, what is an N-word doing on the Japanese team? I'm like, okay, dude, relax. And then there's other people who are saying, he's just as Japanese as everyone else. Look, screw you, racist. I'm like, okay, shut up. It's like, this is the conversation we have to have, like thinking about nationhood, peoplehood in a serious way, because we do want to preserve our countries, but that doesn't mean that we can't have foreigners in our countries. But at the same time, doesn't mean that we should have non-natives represent our country on the world stage. I would say no. I would say no. In the same way, I don't want white people being in the National Assembly in Korea, and I don't want white people, I don't want black people, I don't want Indians representing Korea on the national soccer team. There's nothing wrong with that. And the more that you normalize this, people say, oh, you're just scaremongering, fear-mongering. Yeah, the more that you normalize this is the inevitable result. The French national soccer team. This is the inevitable result. What is the point of winning if you import foreigners to win? At that point, is your country even winning at that point? No, it's not. You're being invaded. And foreigners are winning on behalf of you, wearing your country as a costume. That's something that we shouldn't want. Preserve your country. There's nothing hateful about that. That's actually a righteous endeavor to preserve your home for your peoples. That is actually a righteous endeavor because God is a God of order. And so if we want social cohesion, we want high trust again in society, of course, we want Christianity to reign, but also we should move towards more homogeneous societies where people have a home with other people that they recognize and that they know. That's why, again, like I said, I go to Korea. Everyone, they don't, if you're white or if you're non-Korean in Korea, even if you speak perfect Korean, they're going to first start talking to you in English. But when I go to Korea, although my English is better than my Korean, they're going to first start talking to me, what? In Korean. And I start talking in Korean. They're like, oh, you're from America, right? I'm like, yeah. But that is how we should think about this issue. It was very contentious. And there's a lot of memeing happening on both sides and a lot of, I'm going to own the chuds. I'm going to own the libs. But ultimately, I do think that we need to think about this at a higher level.